Without imagination, there is no manifesting. Without imagination, there is no manifestation. Without imagination, there is no movement. My name is Mr. 2020, and you are listening to the Power of Imagination podcast. Yeah, we've rebranded. We've upgraded. Because without imagination, there is no movement, there is no imagination. For me to do this podcast, for me to give a really good podcast, I have to imagine that I've given a really good podcast. And I have to imagine something that has me moved to the point where I click the button and say, welcome to the Power of Imagination podcast. You have done nothing in life that didn't start, that didn't originate, that didn't continue because of the power of imagination. Not one thing. Now here's the cool thing. You can manifest the miraculous, you can manifest the mundane. But there's a couple tiny little bits that I want you to get. Number one, Neville Goddard says everything happens automatically. All that you do, all that befalls you. And I'm going to repeat that first part. Everything happens automatically. In other words, you don't have to wait for guidance. You don't have to wait for inspired action. Everything that you do and everything that befalls you happens automatically. It's driven by your occupation. It's driven by your acceptance. It's driven by your state. Everything. Every desire has its own plan, its own power of fulfillment. Every desire has its own plan. Every desire has its own power. You're the operant power. You get to select what goes on your plate. You don't have to grow the carrot. You don't have to raise or butcher the lamb. You don't have to catch the fish. You can if you want to, if that's your desire to. Today I'm going shopping. And I talk to a lot of people, and invariably some of the regulars will ask, how's it going? And I'll tell them, look, I don't got to grow it, I don't got to butcher it. I get to just come here and pick it up. I get to choose what goes in my buggy, I get to choose what goes on my plate. Neville Goddard taught we are selectors. And you select by accepting. What are you accepting in your life? Because you have this power of rejection. We've talked about this. You've got this right of refusal. You've got free will to accept or reject any state, any condition. So why is it that people struggle and suffer? Why is it some people sit there paralyzed, trying to figure out what to do for ages? When I do business consulting, I make suggestions. And I explore angles of opportunity for them to play in. And that's all good and that's all dandy and that's profitable. And the number one thing that happens when people stay stuck and struggle is that they don't know. Right? In other words, their plan is getting in the way. In other words, their lack of plan is getting in the way. In other words, their need for a plan is getting in the way because your desire has its own plan and power of fulfillment. Your desire does. When you accept your desire, you accept its plan and its power of fulfillment. You don't got to figure it out. You get to play your part. So instead of feeling like you need to plan everything, you get to just... You know what I do on the podcast every day? I click the button and talk. Because I've imagined a great podcast that changes lives. I imagine your feedbacks. That's what implies it. Your feedbacks include emails, comments, shares, and purchases. That's what I imagine. Just having some fun, pleasure, and profit. Isn't that what you want? In some way? But here's the thing. I don't have a plan to turn my pleasure into a profit. And I notice a lot of people, they need plans. They need plans. In other words, you're selling the pearl of great price. Instead of your faith in God is measured by your confidence in you, your confidence in you is measured by your ability to be instantaneous and spontaneous. In other words, allow yourself to be moved. Because if you're not moved by your imagining, nothing else is. In other words, I don't try to figure out exactly what I'm going to say. I don't script it. Have you ever heard me speak from a script? The answer is no. What I speak from is a spontaneous. In other words, instead of trying to plan out everything, play more. So I invite you to 3 ways to play today. Number 1, identitybasedmanifesting.com. Identitybasedmanifesting.com. When you change who you're being, you'll change what you're seeing. And so much more. Give that a go. It's awesome. Number 2, we've got something going on right now called the Destiny Project. It begins in about a week. Go to dreamdrivenday.com, not to sign up for dreamdrivenday.com, but to join the Destiny Project. We're doing 4 group calls, and it begins with this. It begins with destined. Because if you make up a plan, you're going to have to be determined to stick with it, and when you don't, you're going to start doubting yourself. You don't need to make up a plan. Your desire has its own plan and power of fulfillment. This is why I can do so much in a day. I do more stuff in the first 5 hours of my day than most people do in a week. Can you tell? So first, identitybasedmanifesting.com. Go get it. Number 2, dreamdrivenday.com. Right now, we're not doing Dream Driven Day. We're doing the Destiny Project. Ask me for details on that or sign up. And number 3, joinremarkable.com. That's our ongoing emergent. We do 1 group call a month there. It's a private Facebook group. Right now it's got about 60 people in it. Can you imagine the fun that we can have there compared to a group with 55,000 of people that keep asking the same questions? In a group of like what we got in Remarkable, you're always diving deeper and exploring new waters, hiking new terrain, climbing new mountains. At your own pace, in your own way. And by the way, that's where this came from. The inspiration of what we explore there. My name is Mr. 2020. You're listening to the Power of Imagination podcast. Imagine something yummy right now as we go into the silence. All right, Mr. 20, I'm planning on joining Remarkable. Mr. 20, I'm planning on diving in deeper. Mr. 20, I'm planning on. You get what planning is a code word for? Stop planning, start playing more. The more you play, the more you can play. And you know my super secret agenda. More playtime and more playmates. Thank you for listening, sharing, and caring about the Power of Imagination podcast. See ya.